episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms, of its written work, its game. Let's meet the panel.
Hi, I'm Larry.
Hi, David.
Hi, Austin.
And I'm Josh. Austin, it's great to have you back on for another season of the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
As always, Dr. Bordelon and Larry on the end, who frequently makes waves in each of our discussions.
Okay.
Last week, we had a pretty intense discussion of The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, and today we're going to be going over something that is very much meaningful and maybe not as intense, but at the same time a great piece of literature, and that is One Art by Elizabeth Bishop. And Dr. Bordelon, you are presenting the discussion starter for today?
Yeah. I've been a fan of Elizabeth Bishop's work for years. Teach her regularly in classrooms, and I was just going through, kind of to prepare for today, I was going through this book, Conversations with Elizabeth Bishop. It's part of a series by Mississippi University Press, where they collect interviews with particular writers. And in it, I ran across a 1978 interview. And in it, Elizabeth Bishop writes, she's talking about people discussing her poems, and she says, the nicest audience I ever had was children at the American School in Rio. They asked good questions like, why did you choose this word instead of that? Simple, practical things. And I'm going to start off our discussion with just that. So the poem we're discussing is One Art, and it's a poem about losing things. Why does she call it art? Why is the poem, or why is, and here I can just go to the poem real quick, as she says, she opens, the art of losing isn't hard to master. So why does she call it an art? What are the implications, ramifications behind the use of that one word?
It's first of all, you had assigned this for your very last class that I think it ended up becoming optional at the end, so it was unfortunate that I only got to it just now. But I think that losing things, it all comes down to how you perceive, whether or not you handle it, like in most of the poem, she handles it sarcastically or in a way that it is not a great deal. Not until that very last one, where she inserts the fact that she has to bear the struggle that there are some things that being able to master the art of losing things is too hard to bear for oneself. Because if you're also looking at it naturalistically, everything is born, everything dies eventually. Things come and go, and with
entropy,
and with someone like the particular art in itself, I think that what she's trying to get at is it's supposed to, because of this naturalistic way of thinking, the loss of a loved one is supposed to be the same as the loss of your car keys or in her door keys, but it's not to the individual.
And I think about art. Art is something. What was the definition of art, Austin? If I would ask you, you do something artful, what would you think that means? Artful, because that's the way I think she's using the word.
Sure. I feel like for me to do something artfully is to kind of. It's so hard to, of course, give a definition to, but I guess I try to think of art as it's something with a meaning bigger than itself, right?
That's a great way of looking at it.
So whatever art is, it can be anything, its meaning is not necessarily just what it is, but there's a larger meaning behind it. So yeah, I guess that's how I do it.
What are you thinking? If you say art, like if you say you do something artfully, you program artfully, or you, when you think of art, it could be cooking. And people say that it's a very artful chef or something, or the art of cooking, right? Which is a book. When you hear art used in that way, what are you thinking?
Skill.
Right. So and I think that's what she's getting at. Now, is it just a skill, or would you add something to it? Because I'm thinking of like skill, but it's graceful as well. So you're doing it, not only you have the skill of doing it, but there's a certain style or grace to doing it. And then, so she's saying the art of losing. So how can you learn, and you started off great where you said, like, how do you learn to lose well and with grace? And then she says, just accept it, like this, in a sense, to just accept things.
I also perceive art as the way that other people perceive it as well, not just because the individual is the one that may create the art, or in this case, nature's the one that's putting together this artistic concoction. But I also don't see just one person. I see multiple people perceiving it as well, and I think that in reality it is just that, because someone may be enduring something one way, and then other people may perceive it in a completely different way, whether it be much more intimate or because unfortunately people hold much greater sympathy or sorrow for something that they are much closely connected to.
Right. I want to pick up on the idea you said intimate, and I had said before, Art of Cooking, which is a famous book. There's the art of love, right? There's all these different art of, and the art of losing. And of course, by the end of the poem, we see it is about, in a sense, the art of love, and it's about how do you let go of someone. You can also say it's like the art of accommodation, acceptance, all these different things. Yeah. So her use of the word art there, and I love that it's one art. It's not like, the art, it's one of many arts. So this is one of the things that you should, although she says the art of losing isn't hard to master, by saying it that way, by framing it that way, she's really saying you should master this. Like she's saying this is something we need to understand. We need to learn how to accept losing things.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that, and maybe this says more about myself than about her, but I also kind of agree with what Josh was saying about, kind of getting towards the end, and she starts off, saying, oh, it's, you can master losing things,
right,
and it's okay, we can learn that. And then towards the end, you kind of really see the pain that she is feeling, and it really isn't actually so easy to lose things that are really close to us. And so I kind of read the idea of, calling it an art as something that I do very similar with a lot of my friends, where if we have similar issues, we will make really grossly negative jokes about, myself or my situation in my life.
To exaggerate, yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of write things off that way.
Yeah, it dulls the pain. Yeah.
And I almost feel like in some ways, like I said, it could be
That's great.
more of, seeing myself in this, but seeing Elizabeth Bishop, oh my gosh, as doing the same thing here, kind of saying...
psychology, yeah, great. Huh?
Yeah.
That's great.
So I think it's...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems like she's coping with loss, right? Like that's what it seems like to me. Like, because she keeps repeating that refrain that it's not a disaster
right.
when you lose things. And I think that that's just kind of a mantra that she has carried with her through all of these different losses, and now she's dealing with something more meaningful and substantial that she's on the verge of.
Larry, it's great that you brought up the repetition. I find it so ironic because losing is so random. It happens, you never know. And here she's writing in a very constrained verse form, a V&L, where you have to repeat a whole line in addition to specific words. So here she is talking about the randomness of life, how you just lose things, and yet using a form that is anything but random. So to me, it picks up on the art. Notice the poem is titled One Art. It's not titled Losing, it's art. And of course, she's practicing the art of poetry. So it makes it so evocative, and apparently other people did as well, because her book of letters is called One Art. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the reasons why this poem is so important in Elizabeth Bishop's oeuvre is that it ties on so many things. It's not just about losing things. It has all these echoes of all these other ideas.
It's exactly what, with regard to the title, it's exactly why I had a misconception of what the poem was actually going to be about. I thought it was more about art itself, and I think the art of losing things wasn't the first thing I thought of.
Right.
But Larry had Larry brought up a point about this being a sad poem, and how there's this collection of books that I got at Barnes & Noble. It is Poems That Make Grown Women Cry. This is the sequel to Poems That Make Grown Men Cry. And Clara Bloom, who was an actress in film, theater, and television, she cited this as her the poem that made her cry. I think I got, yeah, this is the right page. She cited the fact that this poem was inspired by the deaths that she had to endure of many of her colleagues, and also brought up the idea that her brought up the fact that her parents died at a very young, when she was very young, and how she has this life experience has allowed her to master this art of losing things, which by that last paragraph, she wants you to feel that with the interjections in the parentheses.
Right. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, in that last stanza, it is so good because she says, there's a dash, and then she writes, even losing you. And here's where it gets personal. All throughout the poem, she was talking about keys, about all these really abstract ideas, but there, that final stanza, she makes it personal, and it becomes clear that the poem is addressed to a person, and apparently someone that she loved. And what I love is that parenthetical, the first parenthetical clause in that last stanza. Even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture I love. And I love that because those are the things you like about a person. It's not the way they look, it's the way that they say something, or it's, as it says, a gesture. It could be a movement that they make. And I think it's so good that she captures in a poem like the totality of the experience with a person. Which, to get back to the parentheses, so in that first part it talks about the joking voice tied to a particular person, so that's directed to the person that she's speaking to, but then it comes at the end, and the last 3 lines, it's evident the art of losing's not too hard to master, though it may look like, and this parentheses is just delicious. So she pauses, and the speaker has to force herself, and she says, write it, italicized right, and then with the exclamation point, like disaster. So it's even in that, she's like almost patting herself on her back, like, you get over this, it's okay, but man, right now, it is disaster. So it's so great, there's so much emotion and so much almost physical movement contained by something as simple as typography, italics, and punctuation, parentheses, and an exclamation
And the
point.
2 likes, too.
What's that?
And the 2 likes.
Yeah, very good. Good job,
because
Josh. Yeah.
when you become at a loss of words, it's a
very
sign
good.
of hesitation and in some case anxiety.
Oh, that's great, yeah.
Another thing I like about the kind of the form and the structure, as you were saying, it's a vignelle, as it's pronounced, which is a very specific and kind of strict form for poetry. So I think relating that to the idea of the art of losing, saying there's so much that goes on in life that is so out there, and it doesn't have a formula, and everything just makes no sense. So for me to deal with it, I'm going to use this incredibly formulaic way of writing, and not just myself, but I know so many people in life who do that. When people are struggling and really hurting, they will hold on so dearly to the things in life that give them structure. So that's interesting. And the other thing I think is very interesting is how, when she's talking about the things that are being lost, it goes from the smallest things, and then it gets bigger and bigger. And I think it's so interesting. It goes from door keys, my mother's watch, to I've lost 2 cities, and the very last thing is even losing you. I think it's so interesting how not just size of items and scope, but we're putting a person at the very end, saying losing you is even harder than losing cities that I love because of how important you were to me. And I think that idea and how that the structure is and what is introduced after the next thing is really important.
Oh, that's great reading. Yeah, really good.
Yeah, and I think that idea that it isn't a disaster is really being tested. We're in the past. We're in the past. It's like, well, I lost this, I lost that. And it was always easy to say that loss isn't is easy to deal with and all that. But then once, you know, she's losing something again that's so substantial to her, now it's like, you know, she has to force herself to write what she always took for granted to be true.
Right. It's easy to say it. It's easy to say all this stuff, but man, when it's really impacting you at the moment, and you just reminded me, the poem seems to be at the height of the loss, like when it's most sharp.
Yeah.
So all that other stuff is in the past. So I have hope for the speaker of the poem. It's like, you'll make it. I want to pat her on her shoulders. You'll make it. You know, you survived all these other breakups of things. So hopefully you'll make it, but I'm not sure if the poem points too much hope.
It was written in 1976. She was 65 at the time, and she would die 3 years later.
Right.
Which...
Yeah, a later poem published in her last book of poetry titled Geography 3, which is interesting that she titles it Geography. Many of the poems in the book are connected to geography, and of course this book, as you noted, it starts with the Mother's Watch, but then it talks about cities and realms, you know, nations. So she does kind of tie in that thing.
Absolutely. Anybody have any final thoughts for this?
No, I mean, like, I can barely wrap my head around it, honestly. I mean, my only final thought is that, like, just, you know, talking about it with you guys, you know, help me understand it better, because coming in here, I really didn't know what I thought of this, and yet I like it. It's good. It's a good poem.
Yeah.
It definitely warrants multiple reads.
Yeah.
I would say,
Yeah.
including those out loud.
Right.
Auditory.
Oh, great point. Yeah.
My only thought is I question how sad the poem has to be, because I think we talked about how the poem, and it is sad in certain ways, but I also, kind of like you said, you know, you want to give the pat on the back to the speaker to say, like, you know, you will get over this. And I also, depending on what state I'm in, I feel like I can get multiple readings from this poem. It can be very sad, and it can be a book that makes a half-grown, whatever I am, cry. But it also, I don't know, I can find a lot of other emotions in it, so I think that's very interesting at this point.
It's naturalistic, so if you're looking at it from nature's point of view, you're not supposed to feel something. And I think that up until that very last stanza, Elizabeth Bishop, or whoever the speaker is trying to get at that point. But there are things at the very end that it becomes too hard to bear, that the human point of view, it just comes crashing down on them, and they cannot, it becomes too difficult to master this art.
No, good.
I lost. All right, it's painful. I don't think, you know, you can't really get away from that. I mean, when you lose something that you value, it's gonna hurt. I don't think there's much you could do about that.
Except you could write a poem about it.
Yeah.
That would be one thing. You could write a brilliant poem about it.
You can find this and just about all of Elizabeth Bishop's poems in this collection, titled Poems. She also has a yellow covered book titled Prose, which I probably would have not gotten it if it wasn't, but it was 90% off. And I'm a book collector, so eventually I was going to get it. You have...
I think this was an earlier edition. It features a watercolor on the cover, and Elizabeth Bishop, like many writers, also does plastic art or physical art, and she did watercolors. In fact, she oftentimes, the covers of her books were works of watercolor that she had done herself.
Right, so, and then there's poems that make grown women cry. This was put together by Anthony and Ben Holden. They're a father and son team, and they got a lot of noteworthy people to contribute. And the prequel is poems that make grown men cry.
And we should probably also mention that that this is not the first of her works that we've talked about on this show.
No, we went over in the waiting room.
In the waiting room.
Great poem. Yeah.
So, you know, if you want to see more of our discussions about Bishop, you know, you can search that out.
I'll leave a link to that discussion as well, and I'm pretty sure that this is not going to be the last that we go over from her collection, because in the waiting room we got a pretty. It continues to get a good reception as well.
Oh, good.
So, so things work. sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators. For now, keep reading.